So guys, this week I am riding solo, as Jason Derulo says. Jake is not with me this week. He is ill. He has laryngitis apparently. I just think he's been lazy, but Jake thought it was a good idea to get me riding solo and doing 10 sales questions. Now, quick caveat to this, I have seen these sales questions about 25 minutes ago. And what I did was, I think it's a good thing, because what I did was I started making notes about 10 minutes ago. And they did this because they wanted it to be authentic. They didn't want it to be, show me yesterday or the day before, so then I could go off, do loads of research and have like amazingly scripted answers to these. I think, and I agree with them, I do think the best way to do this is to actually tell you the way we do it, the way we think about it, but also the way we do it, because they are two different things. So that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to relate this back to Revamp. I've been in sales for a lot of years now, whether I kind of knew it or not. I started high ticket selling about 6 years ago. And I've been selling in gyms now for a good over a year, but I've done about 160 consults in a year, which is pretty wild. So hopefully I can give you guys some value today and you can take this back to your gyms. So that's the plan. What I'm going to do, each question is going to come up on the screen, and then I might look down at my notes that I made not long ago to remind myself, but we'll go from there. Objections are a funny one. Depending on who you listen to and what you watch will kind of depend on how you want to handle objections. Now, I think very differently about objections to what I used to think. I used to go in with objections quite hard, get quite direct. But essentially, when you're in a gym environment, in a consultation, the objection always comes down to money, but it will be covered with something else. So let me give you an example of that. An example of that could be, I want to go home and talk to my husband, right? That's probably the most common one we get. Now, that is really hidden behind, I want to talk to him about the finances of being able to join. Cool. But as the sales guy, getting to that could be quite an awkward face-to-face experience, not just for them, but for you as well. So I would deal with the spouse objection. And I would deal with it something like this. My first question would be, okay, cool, no problem at all. Does he know that you're unhappy at the moment with yourself? And then they'll say yes. And then the next question is, okay, and is he on board with you staying unhappy and remaining in this way or not? No, he's not on board with that. He wants me to be happy. Okay, cool. So then the biggest problem is you're asking for permission and not support, right? Whereas if you were to ask for support, it would be a lot easier, because you could say, I'm going to do this. I'm doing this for myself because of X and Y reason, and I really want your support on this. Instead of going to ask permission first, and then I would wrap it around a story, guys. So you can talk about another client you've had, or you could talk about a family member or a friend, because I've seen this before with my friend Sarah. She went home and she asked for permission instead of support when she was making a health-related decision like this. And her husband said no, because he didn't know full context. So he just said no, because all he saw was the money, right? And then years later, she had gone backwards from where she was then, even though she was very unhappy. And now she's really, really unhappy. And there's a lot of resentment in their marriage. Okay, so I would always say, just having seen this before, always ask your husband for support with a decision like this. Right, so that's kind of how I would frame it. Other people say things like, what would your husband say? Right, and get a bit more direct. During sales, that's completely up to you. It depends on how you'd like to sell. But I would always go, the biggest one for us is spouse, and that's how I would handle it with those two questions, and then ask them about the permission against support theory. First ever sales interaction, good question. I was an apprentice in a gym about 20 minutes away from here, selling gym memberships when I was 16. So 16, 17, I was an apprentice for 2 years, guys, on £3 an hour for 2 years. Ask me how I lived, because I don't actually know, but at the time I thought I was rich. And I was selling gym memberships every day. Super easy, because they'd come down there, they'd gone in and it was like a £30 product. I then went into selling high ticket, did that for 6 years, selling high ticket products for 5, 6, 8 grand. I think 8.5 grand we sold to. But I don't think you should necessarily think of it as first sales interaction. I think you should think of it as first negotiating interaction. So I started negotiating very, very early. The more you put yourself in negotiating situations, the more you'll be happy to sit there through sales. Because sales can be awkward, right? It certainly can feel awkward, even though it really doesn't have to be. But that's the reason why people shy away from it. But if you put yourself in negotiating situations, you're going to find sales much easier. So a guy I follow on Twitter, a guy called Nick Gray, he has this thing where, I mean, he's a gazillionaire, but he has this thing where he goes into any shop, whether it's Starbucks or just a normal shop, and he negotiates the price on things. So even if it's like a standard coffee from Starbucks, he'll try and negotiate the price on that Starbucks just to flex that muscle on a daily basis. So when he's ever selling again, he finds it much easier. So I made some really quick notes on this one. I think I don't think there's one. There's a number, right? But I think questions come from qualifying, questions come from emotion, and questions come from a decision process. Okay, so with qualifying, what I'll do is I'll really try and quickly qualify the purchasing power of the lead. So when they come in, I might ask a question like, have you ever seen a personal trainer before, right? So that's obviously, have they invested in fitness before? Another question might be, tell me about your day-to-day. So is your job, is it desk related? Like, are you active? Like, talk to me about that. And very often they'll talk to you about what they do for a living, right? So those are a couple of qualifying questions. The emotion question is really, really simple. So the emotion question is one that you'd all ask about goal. What's your biggest goal? Why are you here? Why have you come in today, right? But you don't stop there. You should always start chunking down the goal from that point. So if it's, I want to lose weight, for example, which is the most common one we get, the second question is, why is that important to you? We're always asking questions, yeah? Why is that important to you? Oh, I want to be able to, run around with my children. I want to be able to keep up with my children. Oh, that's awesome. Like, why is keeping up with your children important to you? So you're going to keep on chunking down to get to the real core emotion as to why they're actually sitting with you at that point. And I think that's really, really important from an emotional perspective. And then the final one I've got here is decision. So you get to the end of your pitch, like our guys roll for a sales deck. They get to the end of that sales deck and it says next steps. And at the end, once you've gone through those next steps, I'm not going to take you through them here because we'll be here a long time. You're going to ask what we call the yes question. The yes question is, cool, do you want to sign up? Or cool, should we get you signed up? The reason we call it a yes question is because it's really hard to say no to, right? So the prospect wants to say yes to that question. If they don't say yes, they'll say, oh, I just want to go away and think about it, which normally means they want to talk to their spouse. So I'd always isolate why they want to go away and think about it. And if they go away, talk to their spouse, we've seen around 92% don't sign up. So as soon as they walk out of the studio without paying, there's a 9 out of 10 chance that they are not going to sign up with you. Okay, so just keep that in mind. In sales, there are a number of ways, but this should always start with marketing. So your marketing should create the necessary urgency for someone to be there anyway. So for example, when we're launching gyms, we'd always communicate capacity, right? How many people are on the waiting list? How many people are waiting for that email every single week? So that's kind of where the urgency can start. So that's marketing's job. That's Jake's job. I've got one main sales way to create urgency here. And it's kind of the language you use during a consult. So we'd always use language such as invite. If we were to choose to invite you in, I use accept. So if we're going to accept you as a member, I go through a piece of phrasing where I say, so it's a 6-week challenge because that's our front end. And then I say, no one can just join Revamp as a member. They have to go through the 6 weeks first. And that's so that you can see the product. But more importantly, we can make sure that we've got a great partnership. And if we have got a great partnership, we'll invite you to become a member after 4 or 5 weeks. Okay, so I use that kind of language and phrasing to show that you're going to pander to me, not the other way around. And that's how we create urgency during a sales consult. And obviously you can talk about you have 5 spots left, or you have 8 spots left, or you've been full all year, we've only just opened up some spots right now. That's going to be really simple urgency. Obviously you just need to make sure it's true, otherwise it's not ethical.
Hey, quick one from us. If you're enjoying this episode, you'll love our free weekly newsletter.
It's for current and aspiring studio owners who are looking for the latest growth hacks to sign up more members and keep them.
It's a quick 2-minute email covering the stuff we're testing in our own gyms.
So you'll be getting access to what's working today.
If you're interested, you can join 3,500 gym owners and go to thefitpreneur.com and subscribe.
That's thefitpreneur.com. Anyway, back to the episode.
Following up, so not as important in gym sales as it is from other ways of selling I've done in the past. It's important because that old saying is the fortune is in the follow-up. It's not as lucrative, shall we say, as it used to be. But I would say one key rule is you're always marketing to the no people anyway. So you're always going to be following up anyway for your marketing. Because when they say no, they want to go talk to their spouse about it and they never come back and ghost you, that's probably because they weren't in enough pain yet, or they weren't in a position to actually do it at that point, right? And often it's behind something else too. So sometimes they've been burnt before, or they've tried loads of fitness things before. They've been on keto, or they've done this crap juice diet and all of this kind of stuff, right? And it's never worked for them before, so why should it work now? Because that's what they're thinking about in their minds. So are they in the right spot to do it just then? They might not be, hence it wasn't an absolute yes. That's why you continue to market to people, market to all the no people, because one day, probably fairly soon, they're going to be in that spot because they haven't moved forward yet. They're still in the same pain that they were in before. So that's my always, obviously if someone goes away, wants to speak to their spouse, we'll always follow up with texts and phone calls because that's good business practice. That's what we should do. But we won't continue to follow up days and days and days. God, this has changed over the years as well. It used to be where we used to just do a bit of a dance together, and we used to go back and forward on price with a prospect. That would very often, push people into making the decision which is best for them. Even, it's really hard with high ticket because people have been through that dance with coaches before. For gym sales, it's a lot easier because the market hasn't been through that. And very often they're not aware of sales strategies and tactics. So the one that I would always go for is the delayed payment close. So the delayed payment close is really, really simple. This is what we teach our guys. We don't press people on price. I did have one of the very first consults I had at one of the locations. Someone said to me, cool, that's a lot of money. And then I just really simply asked the question back to them. This was a male, he was in the military. I asked, so you got to know your prospects, by the way, just caveat off that. So I asked the question back to him and basically said, I didn't think this would be a problem for you. So I spoke to his ego and he ended up paying. So again, it's knowing your prospect, but I would always go with delayed payment close. Other ways of doing it are cost of inaction. So we can relate this back to our questionnaire, for example, where there's a question on there which basically said, how long have you had this goal on your mind? And if it's like 6 years or forever, we get that a lot. We can go, look, like you told me earlier, because you can relate it back, look, you've been thinking about this goal for like 6 years. What's the alternative here? Are you going to go for another 6 years? And you can kind of get to the emotion in that way and talk about cost of inaction and all that stuff. Like you're going to pay for it one day, it's just whether you pay for it and you're going to get to the result faster or slower, all that stuff. But the delayed payment close is simple. We say, look, hey, like you can relate this to someone else who's just been in, for example. Janine actually come in earlier. You might have seen her on the way out. Did you see her? No, I didn't. Okay, you must have just missed each other. She was in the same position as you. Like it was quite a big upfront for her, but she really wanted to do it. And am I right in saying that you really want to do it? Yeah, I do really want to do it. Awesome. So what we can do is we can go half right now and then half right after your next paycheck. Does that work for you? Would that be easier? Yeah, that would be easier. Great, cool. And then you can just delay payment close. Two things, mindset and how emotional they are. So they're kind of interlinked. But mindset, I always look for language. So if they talk about like short-term fixes, if they talk about like, I've got a wedding next month I really want to get fit for, like those are red flags for me. Because yes, we want them to join the challenge and be here for 6 weeks, but I emphasize that this is a kickstart. This is something that you do to integrate new habits into your life, right? Because that's the time that it could take for us to really get moving. So I look for certain language patterns, I look for mindset patterns, I look for emotional patterns. So if they get emotional, for example, on a sales consult, they really talk about their emotion and why they're feeling so unhappy right now, that's a green flag for us. Look, they're really sick and tired of being where they are right now, and they want to get to like long-term sustainability because they've tried so many things before, right? They've tried so many things before and not got there. So yeah, the main thing is kind of emotion and mindset. I look for those pieces of language. And during a consult, sometimes I try and be coachable as well. I try and coach. So I try and get them to understand that this isn't a short thing because that's what you've tried before and it's never worked. So why don't we do something different because we've got more chance. This is pretty easy. Price without context. So when I see small group personal training studios talking about price on the front end, that's a really big problem. They talk about that in the marketing, again, a huge problem, because what people will do is they'll see, like, for example, we're $299, so they'll relate $299 to something else they could buy, right? Or even worse, they'll relate it to a gym membership that they get for £20 a month from Pure Gym, right? Completely different services, completely different results from both services, but that's not seen in their minds at that point because all they're thinking about is pound signs, right? So price without context is a huge no-go. If someone asks us about price, by the way, we have this question a lot. If someone asks us about price, like prior to a sales consultation, we'll say, like, regarding price, we need to go through what your goals are to actually see if we can help you, because we might not be able to help you yet. And if we can help you, we're going to go through all of the details that you need. Okay, but this is in the sales consultation. And if they have an issue with that, we won't see them. A few ways. Has anyone seen the film Focus? Like, say yes to the podcast if you have. Focus with Will Smith and Margot Robbie. That's probably why I remember it. But they get someone to see a number throughout the whole film, and throughout the second half of the film, so they can do their big setup at the end. I can't remember what that number was, but it's like this number is put in that person's face kind of subconsciously, and it's really, really interesting because this is kind of the same premise. So we talked about biases on the pod, like probably 10 episodes ago now. So go back and have a look at all the biases that are in marketing and sales. But this kind of falls under one of those biases. There's 3 key ways I would say that we put it in front of people. Number 1 is our appointment funnel. So obviously this is after they've signed up and booked their sales consult. Obviously there's loads of ways we do it beforehand with our organic content, our ads, all of that stuff. But the 3 key ways after they've booked a consultation and haven't actually come yet. So one is the appointment funnel, where within that funnel, you got FAQ page that go through simple FAQs. I kind of reverse engineer objections and make them sound like frequently asked questions. Really good. If you haven't got a page like that, you need to get one. And within that page, we've got loads of testimonials, members talking to camera, all of those kind of things about their experiences. Number 2 is, obviously we have email sequences set up that go off to that individual before their sales consult, so they'll get all of those member stories in those testimonials, so it's, again, like reaffirmed in their mind. Then the sales deck. So during the consultation itself, I'll take the prospect through the sales deck. Within that sales deck, we've got before and afters of our clients, like huge transformations. And then the third key way, I really like this, it's social proof, which is visual in front of the client during their consultation. So just where the camera is right now to me, I will be sitting here alongside the lead, the prospect, and we will be like looking at what's the iPad or the laptop when I'm taking them through the deck. But for the whole 30 minutes of the consultation, a big TV is in front of them, literally right in front of them, with members talking to camera about their amazing testimonials. It's obviously all got captions, it's not loud. And then before and afters of people, like pictures from our events with everyone happy, like driving the community side. So that's another way that we do it and imprint it in the prospect's mind. as we go through the sales process. So hopefully those ways are helpful to you. I would say I'm softer than I used to be. I'm definitely less direct. I'm always trying to build that bridge of trust, which I think is really important. So it used to be that, it was no matter what, I know this is the best thing for you, so you need to do it. So I'm going to make sure that you do it. It's now not that. It's a lot harder with face-to-face sales. But the key thing is studios have like a recurring belt of leads, right? And people that jump into sales consults. So we're never going to be short in acquisition. And I want the best people join us. So that's not just the best person from a demographic standpoint, who I know are going to stay for years and years, but it's also the best person from a mindset perspective and where they're currently at, and if we can help them. So I've definitely become a lot more empathetic, and I look to build that bridge of trust and make it as long as possible. That's definitely how I've changed, and that's helping that individual make the best possible decision for them. And people have walked out of here when I've gone, I don't think this is going to work for you. And they really do want to sign up. I just don't think it's going to work for them, whether that's logistically or whether that's because of their mindset or whether that's for any kind of reason. So we have made the client make the prospect make the best possible decision for them, which is a no. And that's happened before. So yeah, I think it's just having that mindset and treating it. We always say, treat it like a doctor's appointment and not a sales consult. Like, you're the doctor, you're there to help that individual. And that's the biggest way I've changed in sales in general, definitely. Cool. So there you go, guys. That's 10 answers from me with not a lot of preparation. Hopefully they've helped, giving you a few ideas. People always ask me, especially coaches and our team, kind of where I get this stuff from. And I think like the biggest, I'm obsessed with sales. I always have been. I've always been obsessed with putting myself in quite tough situations, negotiating, all those things. It's like a really cool game to me. But also, Jake and I have invested in ourselves for 7-8 years now. There hasn't really been a single year where we haven't had a coach and help, and people we pay a lot of money to. And you pay down, I think Hormozy calls it ignorant tax. And he's absolutely right. Like, all these things I'm kind of going through, I've heard and put my own stamp on over the years. And that's so that we can get to where we want to be quicker. So I would say to anyone, if you have a skill deficiency, if you want to get better at something, pay someone to get you to the place you want to get quicker, because otherwise it's going to take too long and you're going to run out of time. So that's I'll close with that. But hopefully you enjoyed the pod. Guys, if you haven't subscribed to YouTube, do so. Subscribe to this podcast on Spotify. Go follow us on Instagram. Go jump on the newsletter every week. We don't sell anything ever. We have literally just opened up 2 spots for coaching. We only work with 10 people at once. One of those has already gone. So we do that, but growing revamps and stuff is our whole vibe. So that's what we do. But anyway, that's the pod, guys. Thanks for listening.